this session, just for those folks that aren't able to make it today. Given the number of people in the room and looking at some of the statements and questions that are in the chat, I am going to start us off by just going through a few slides on a slide deck just to get everybody kind of acclimated to the topics that are most prevalent right now. And I think there's some information in there that's important, especially as principals. It'll be important for you folks to be aware of as we move forward with our use of Zoom. So, and again, Gavin is my co-host today. He will be letting people into the room and answering things in chat. I just need to make sure I haven't missed anybody here. Great, okay. So this session is really just meant to be an administrator-focused update, tips and tricks, sort of a smattering of a variety of topics. Some of it is repeat from our Zoom security and classroom management sessions that we held last week. And some of it's new information. Again, it is being recorded, so if anybody didn't make it today, they'll be able to watch the recording later. We post all these recordings to our webinar page in the toolbox. Zoom bombing, unfortunately, is a thing. Some of you may have even seen this happening in classrooms in your school. It's defined as the act of breaking into a Zoom meeting, taking over the screen, putting something in chat or in a conversation, and disrupting the class or the meeting with some sort of obscene or inappropriate content. Generally speaking, the Zoom bombers that we've had contact with have been able to get into classrooms they shouldn't be in by either guessing meeting IDs or by having other students share URLs to those classes with them. So examples might be like, I'm a student in Mr. Smith's first period and I've got a dumb buddy in some other class and I share Mr. Smith's class URL with my dumb buddy who comes in and, you know, says stupid things and leaves. That's considered Zoom bombing. When teachers post their URLs to any sort of public place, which we hope they're not doing, then those URLs end up in the hands of people who can unfortunately join classrooms and get up to no good. And if your teachers or you are using your personal meeting ID over and over and over again, that can unfortunately cause, you know, the sharing of those meeting IDs, and then Zoom bombing can occur. But we're going to talk about some ways to prevent that, so that you don't, even if people do get into rooms that they shouldn't be in, you have ways to kick them out, or your teachers have ways to kick them out. Some more examples: hijacking screen sharing, displaying pornographic content. I haven't seen this in the last couple of weeks in North Shore, thank goodness, because I think teachers are getting better at configuring their settings to prevent these things. But we still have teachers that have not gotten to the point where they've adjusted their settings yet. So we'll go through what some of those things are later. Annotating over someone else's shared screen. So imagine a teacher sharing a slide deck and then somebody annotating over the top, drawing, you know, body parts and things like that. That's considered Zoom bombing. Putting inappropriate comments in chat, making inappropriate screen names. This is actually the most common one that I've seen that teachers have complained about, where kids are renaming themselves and then entering the room as, you know, Joe Bananas or whatever, and they don't know who the kid is. And that's really a really light version of renaming yourself. I've seen some other not so great names like Hitler. We had Hitler join a couple of classes a couple of weeks ago. That was no good. Putting things in the virtual background for everyone to see. That's no fun. Using personal chats to, you know, bully or harass, or taking over audio and uttering things like, you know, racial slurs and foul language and things like that. All of these things are preventable. And we've done, you know, we've tried to do our best to share in a variety of channels ways that teachers can prevent these things by adjusting their meeting settings. And we can talk through some of those today. I'm going to skip through some of the 2022P. You guys are all familiar with the idea that we have procedures in place that govern things like digital citizenship. Your teacher librarian should be a resource for you to help you develop a culture of digital citizenship while we're doing this distance learning thing. If you haven't engaged with your librarian yet, I would suggest finding some time to sit down with them and talk about some ways to establish some school-wide expectations around digital citizenship. And there's a ton of resources out there. The curriculum from Common Sense Media is what we use to teach digital citizenship when we're in school, and it's perfectly adaptable to using for distance learning as well. So go visit Common Sense Media, look at some of the materials there, and engage your librarian to help you reinforce these things. Some general ways to prevent Zoom bombing include the ability to remove somebody from a room. Teachers are starting to get a little more skilled at kicking kids out. There is a setting that lets you disallow rejoining. So if I were to kick Gavin out, for example, if I had my setting set up properly, he would not be allowed to rejoin the room. You could also allow people to rejoin the room, but turn on your waiting room, which would, if I kick Gavin out and he rejoined, he would sit in the waiting room until I was ready to let him back in. There's also a way to just put somebody in the waiting room. And I'll show you a screenshot of that a little bit later. But again, it's just a way to give somebody a timeout, get them out of the room, let them cool off. It's sort of like putting them out in the hallway. I highly recommend whenever you're having a staff meeting or any kind of group meeting where you're going to have more than maybe 10 attendees, that you have a co-host. That lets you focus on content while your co-host focuses on more of that classroom management aspect. If I'm trying to present content and have, facilitate thoughtful discussion among my staff members, and I'm trying to let people in from the waiting room and mute people or monitor chat, my head would explode. So having a co-host is a really solid strategy. And if you haven't sort of enabled that or enacted that practice, I would definitely do so. As administrators, you guys are in a unique position to be able to set some school-wide expectations. That could be as simple as using a slide like this one that you ask all of your teachers to use at the beginning of every class or at the beginning of every office hour session, where it explains the expectations for behavior in our virtual classrooms. Things like having an appropriate screen name. This is, it's vital that teachers know who students are. And if students are naming themselves Banana Face or Dum Dum Head or whatever, then teachers don't know who they are, and it causes distraction, all of those things. So students should always use appropriate screen names. First and last is probably fine, depending on how that recording is going to be shared or how things are recorded. First names are pretty good, especially for the little kids in terms of, ensuring privacy. But the student name should be, you should be able to identify the student by their face and their name, right? They shouldn't make up stupid names. Clothing should be appropriate. We've had a few reports of kids showing up in meetings with, t-shirts that had inappropriate language or advertisements for, alcohol or other things. So clothing should be appropriate, just like you would have a school dress code or, clothing expectations. You can do the same for clothing in virtual classrooms as well. Backgrounds should be appropriate. Virtual backgrounds are great to ensure privacy. Like if you don't, if you have kids that might have something happening at home and having stuff in the background is, maybe questionable as far as their privacy, they can certainly use a virtual background, but it should be appropriate content. There should not be, a big picture of a naked person or whatever. No inappropriate backgrounds. And then of course, interactions should be appropriate as well. Chats and verbal responses and things like that should be appropriate. I think, again, as administrators, if you can set these kind of global expectations and make sure that families are informed and that teachers are using, these ideas consistently across your school, it'll become more of a cultural habit, I think, for students and teachers, as opposed to each individual teacher having their own, version of expectations. Shifting gears a little bit, there's some new things that we've been doing this week to further manage and secure Zoom. These things are good to have in your pocket if you get a parent or a community member who reaches out to you and expresses some kind of concern about the use of Zoom. There has been a lot of media coverage about Zoom and about whether or not it's secure and should we be using it in education. So there are understandably a lot of parents out there who are reading these media reports and, you know, pushing back a little bit on the use of Zoom. If ever you get into a conversation with a family member or a community member who you don't feel like is hearing your message, or for whom you don't feel like you have the right responses, please feel free to send them to me or to Alan. We've fielded a number of these email exchanges, and we have some good information to be able to share with people. Specifically, what we're doing in North Shore this week is we have enabled what are called managed domains. And what that means is that anytime anybody logs into Zoom with either an nsd.org or an apps.nsd.org account, they get scooped up into our domain. They don't get to live out in the free wild anymore. When a user encounters that for the first time, some of you may have seen this week, when you go to log into Zoom on the web, you get this little screen that gives you two options. You can join, or you can switch your email account or whatever, which just means take this account and put it outside North Shore. The whole purpose of this is to ensure that if someone is a North Shore user, that we can bring them in under our umbrella and apply the right kinds of policies to make sure that if they're a student, they have these settings, and if they're a staff member, they have these settings. So just know that staff are going to be seeing this screen to join our North Shore account, and that there are some serious benefits from this, including, as you see at the bottom of the screen there, management of student accounts. One thing we're turning on and have turned on for students, and there are about 1,700 students that have joined our account as of this morning, is that they can no longer host their own meetings. So what this means is that if I'm a student at Inglemoor, for example, up until today, or up until this week, I had the ability to create a meeting and invite whoever I wanted with no parameters and no restrictions. So I could send that meeting URL to a bunch of my friends at Inglemoor. I could send it to, a bunch of people in a class. I could, host this meeting and have 50 of my closest friends join together to talk about how much they hate Mr. Schindler, whatever, right? As students are rostered into our North Shore account, they're going to get scooped up into a student group that forces them, when and if they create a meeting, it forces that meeting to only be joinable with an account that doesn't exist. So we've sort of faked Zoom into thinking that students can create meetings, but nobody can join them. That's essentially the bottom line there. If you have teachers who need to have students meeting together to, partner on projects or collaborate on something school related, then those meetings should be facilitated by a teacher. They should not be unsupervised. And you can do that using breakout rooms, or teachers can actually schedule, for example, recurring meetings for those students, and then, facilitate the collaboration and partnership. We had a couple of teachers yesterday who reacted very strongly to the idea that kids couldn't have their own meetings. And after consultation with cabinet, it was confirmed kids should not be creating their own meetings, and they should not be unsupervised in their Zoom rooms. Now, all of this to say, kids can go out into the wild and create a personal Zoom account and host their own meetings outside of North Shore. But if they're using their North Shore account, they're going to follow North Shore rules. That's basically the scoop there. As of this week, we're starting to enforce staff logging in with @nsd.org and students with @apps.nsd.org, which means that a bunch of staff, some of you included, may have duplicate accounts. You may have an apps account and an nsd.org account. We're going to be merging those accounts this weekend so that all of your scheduled meetings and your recordings in your apps account get merged into your North Shore account, and then you start using your North Shore account. If you need any help with that, or you have any specific questions or any concerns, please reach out to a coordinator or to me, and we'll walk you through that process. Okay. I'm just going to check the chat really quick, just make sure we're doing good here. Been letting some people into the room as well. A couple of the questions in the chat remind me that there are two kinds of updates. There's two conceptual updates happening here. One is the update of your software, your Zoom software. That is the go to self-service, update the Zoom desktop client, and make sure you have the most current version of that software on your computer. And Zoom puts out new updates like almost every day or every other day now. So we're trying to keep the updates and self-service going, and we're also trying to figure out how to enable auto updates so that you don't ever have to go to self-service. We're working on those things. But do make sure that you go to self-service and that you're running that update to make sure you have the latest supported version of Zoom. Let's see. The other update that we're talking about are these security updates. So when I sent out the email the other day about Zoom updates, that wasn't meant to be software updates. That was updates to our account management protocol. Cool, cool, cool. Okay, awesome. You guys are asking good questions. Okay. So there was a question in the chat about a teacher who was trying to invite parents to an IEP meeting or something like that, and they couldn't get in. And I think I know why. As of Monday, the default meeting setting for all of our users is that they have to use North Shore credentials to log into Zoom. Well, that's this right here. When you're setting up a meeting, if you don't change this to something else, then if they're not a North Shore user, they cannot sign into your classroom. They cannot come to your classroom or come to your meeting. So if you're hosting a meeting where you want non-North Shore people, like parents and such, to be able to join the class, what you want is sign into Zoom. Okay. So when you're scheduling a meeting, you'll see the thing on the right? You click only authenticated users can join, and you pick the authentication option that works for you. You guys are pests. Sorry, had to let the dogs in. Okay. So again, the default meeting setting is only authenticated users can join, and they have to log in with North Shore credentials. And when you're scheduling a meeting, use North Shore credentials to log into Zoom means that only North Shore people can come to that meeting or that classroom. But sign into Zoom means you could have somebody at gmail.com join the class. For those of you with teachers of little kids, preschool, K1, 2, I've heard that many of the Zoom, the circle time and the read alouds have been joined by parents as opposed to using the student accounts. In that case, you want to set up those classes as sign in to Zoom. You don't want to use North Shore credentials, because if parents are not using their student account to log in, they'll not be able to join the meeting. Okay. So Kim, I think it was your question about an LC teacher trying to host an IEP meeting. That LC teacher needs to choose sign into Zoom to let non-North Shore people into that meeting. Cool. Cool.
Hey, Shelby, can you clarify, was that, as we're moving to this NSD umbrella, was that default set for folks, the require authentication?
It is the default when somebody joins our instance. So use North Shore credentials is set as the default.
Okay, so is it possible that a few of the latecomers that are kind of moving into having a licensed account might be running into some difficulty because they're not realizing that authentication is in place right now?
That is
and
correct.
We're not quite fully moved over?
That is correct.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yep, you bet. There are also some things you can do during the meeting, and I think some folks asked about this a little bit in the chat. There are some different strategies you can do to prevent somebody who's in your room who's just being a jerk. They may not be Zoom bombing, but you might have a staff member who's hogging up airtime, or who maybe has a dog barking in the background, and it's causing irritation, or whatever the case may be. As the host or a co-host, when you hover over somebody's name in the participant list, you get this more menu right here. You can also do it from gallery view. So when you have that Brady Bunch style, like I can see all my people, if you hover over their picture and click on the little 3 dot thing, you get the same options there. But you can do things like you can chat that particular person, you can stop their video, you can spotlight their video, which is kind of fun. If you have a student or you have a staff member who you want to be like front and center, you want to put them on stage, you can spotlight their video, which sort of makes them the focus of attention for the whole meeting, or the whole group of people. Somebody asked how to make somebody a co-host. Here's how to do that. It's in that more menu, either in the participants list or in gallery view. And co-host gives that person the ability to do some of these same things, right? To control chat and to answer things in the background and to kick people out and so on. One strategy that some teachers are starting to use is to put students who are not on task or whatever out in the waiting room. And that just sets them out in kind of a timeout zone and keeps them from disrupting the rest of the class, but it doesn't completely kick them out of the room. If you want to completely kick somebody out of the room because they got in by accident or they got in, they shouldn't be there, that's what remove is for. You kick them out. And if your settings are such that they can't rejoin, then they're out for good. They don't get to ever come back. All right. Screen sharing controls are really important to have handled. As a host, my default settings in Zoom, when I go through all of my account settings, my default for every meeting is that only I can share. If I wanted Gavin to share at this point, he would need to be a co-host, or I would need to change this setting within the meeting, which I could do right now. I could just go to advanced settings, advanced sharing options as it shows in that little screenshot, and I can change that to all participants, and that lets anybody share. But the best default to have is that only the host can share. Okay. In the participants list in your meeting, you have some additional options as well. At the bottom of that participants list, there's a more menu, and some things to be aware of are that you can mute participants upon entry, which is a setting that I have on by default. You can choose whether or not participants can unmute themselves, which for groups of students where you might have a couple of miscreants, maybe you don't want that box checked, right? You want them all to be muted so they can't say dumb things. And then as the host or the teacher, you can unmute them when it's time for them to speak. A bunch of folks have heard the ding dong chime when people enter a room and can't figure out where that's coming from or how to turn it off. That's this thing, this play chime, enter exit chime. That's this guy. I have that turned off so that I don't hear ding dong, ding dong, ding dong every time somebody shows up in the room. Allow participants to rename themselves. If you don't want kids to rename themselves from, Gavin Molitor to Banana Face Jones, you would uncheck that box, and that way they can't change their screen name. You can change their screen name, but they can't change it to something else. Lock the meeting means once everybody's there, nobody else can join. You click lock meeting, and even if a Zoom bomber got the URL for that classroom, they couldn't join. And then put participants in waiting room on entry is exactly what you experienced today. This little set of tools down at the bottom is called nonverbal feedback. And that's a setting I can show you how to set up when we go out into the Zoom world. Those can be really helpful for when you're keeping all of your participants quiet, but you want to get feedback from them. Like, I might ask, hey, can you all hear me? And you could go and click the yes in the nonverbal feedback thing in the participants list. And then a little icon would show up next to your name that says yes. So do that now, just for funsies. Go open the participants list. Yeah. And can you hear me? People click yes, so I can see little things, right? There's yes, no, there's a clappy hand, a thumbs up, there's a coffee cup, like, I need a break. It's fun. Cool. Okay. That's fun. Let's see, we've talked about all of those.
I am now Banana Face Jones, by the way.
Oh, excellent.
Not sure if anybody noticed that, but
I was
thanks for the new name.
I was Shelbshub Herpaderp in another meeting. It was great.
Nice.
So as far as messaging and chat is concerned, when you think about the context of your audience, it's important to consider how you've allowed them to chat. I think I have chat pretty open in our webinar today, but you have the option, and teachers have the option, to turn off chat completely, to only allow chat between the participants and the host, everyone publicly, and everyone publicly and privately. So the most restrictive would be to turn off chat entirely. So nobody gets to use chat for anything. And then it's successively less restrictive. My recommendations to teachers are generally either no chat or host only. And what that does is if a student has a question, they can put it in the chat, but only the host sees it. Okay. There's also a setting that lets you do a file transfer. Generally speaking, for teachers, I suggest that they turn this off. If it's on, it means that a person can put something nasty in as a file. They could put an image of somebody's butt or, you know, some other inappropriate body part or whatever. So generally file sharing, I suggest that people turn that off. Let's talk about breakout rooms for a minute. All I've done here is grab a screenshot of the support article in Zoom's help that shows you how to create breakout rooms. And Gavin, can I ask you a favor as a co-host?
Sure.
Would you go out to Zoom support and grab the URL for the article about breakout rooms and put it in the chat so people have that
Sure.
as a link that they can visit? That article does a really nice job, better job than we could do building up this documentation from scratch, of talking about how to set up breakout rooms. And for that matter, generally speaking, Zoom support is fantastic. As much as we've created webinars and videos and all these things, Zoom's support is straightforward, it's well written, it's easy to search, and it's just in time. So as you have questions about things, be sure to use Zoom support to see if you can find an answer to your question. Let me turn off my pointer here. So breakout rooms are fun. I have, as the host, just like you see in the screenshot here, I have this in my toolbar. I have, since I've enabled breakout rooms, all I have to do is click on breakout rooms, and you won't be able to see what I can see because I'm the host and you are not. But let me stop my sharing here for just a second. Get rid of that. Okay, so what I'm seeing in my my Zoom window that you can't see is this little window that says breakout rooms, and it says assign 21 participants into, and then I have the number of rooms at my disposal, right? I can make 2 rooms or 7 rooms or 21 rooms or whatever. I also have the option to assign you automatically, like let Zoom put you into those rooms, or I can do it manually. So if you have people that you want to put in specific rooms, or you have a teacher, you know, who wants to put kids in leveled groups or, you know, heterogeneous groups, they can use the manual feature to do that. I'm just going to click automatically, and I'm going to click the blue, there's a blue button that says create breakout rooms. So I'm going to make 3 rooms with 7 participants each. I'm clicking create breakout rooms. And again, what you can't see, but I will take a screenshot of it so I can show it to you, is I've got a list of who's going to be in each breakout room. So let me show you what that looks like really quick here. So I'm now just sharing my desktop, but my Zoom stuff doesn't show up. So here's a screenshot of what that window looks like in Zoom. So breakout room 1 has, you know, these 7 people, breakout room 2, and so on and so forth. And when I'm ready, I can just open all rooms. I can also click the options thing, or some of these other buttons to make some adjustments to what those rooms look like. So for now, what I will do is, let's see. I'm just looking at my options really quick here. I have move all participants into breakout rooms. I have allow participants to return to the main session at any time. Countdown after closing breakout room. I can set a countdown timer and so on and so forth. Okay, so I'm just going to open all rooms and put you guys in your breakout rooms. Here we go. you're getting invited to join your breakout room. You accept the invitation, you go into your room.
People.
Hi, breakout room 1. How's it going?
Hi, Shelby. So you can.
I get to join. I can join your breakout room. I can also leave your room and go somewhere else. So I'm going to go do that now.
Shelby.
So am I today for the first time.
Room 2, how's it going in your breakout room?
Oh, so nice of you to check in on us.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure everybody was, successful and understanding the things, doing okay, right?
Hey,
Okay.
Shelby, can I
Cynthia
ask a
is
quick,
cussing a lot.
Oh,
can I
aside
ask a
from that,
quick
it's good.
question?
yes, Ann, what's up?
I saw there was like an Excel spreadsheet that you can create the breakout room beforehand.
Yep.
But it didn't work.
There's a CSV file you can use.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah. So let me
work though.
Let me rejoin the room and maybe we
Okay.
can walk through that.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Welcome back. I didn't get to join room 3, but rooms 1 and 2 were hard at work doing all the things.
Yeah, we had some great questions in our space. I jumped out a little bit early as somebody else was kind of still going, so hopefully they'll come back and join and ask those questions. One of the questions was, can you continue, like what happens with the video as far as breakout rooms? Can you continue to see video recorded later of those breakout room sessions? And then the other one, which I think you were doing, is how do you monitor all those breakout rooms? And it sounds like you have the ability as the host to bounce around from room to room.
I sure do. So my breakout room window stays active as the host, and as soon as I open the rooms, there's a little link next to each breakout room name that says join. So I just use that to navigate into the room. I pop in, I hear Bruce swearing a whole bunch. I, discipline him appropriately and I kick him out. And then I go to room 2 and I check on them and so on and so forth. I didn't get a chance to see room 3, so I hope nobody in room 3 was misbehaving because I wasn't there to discipline you. I can also...
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
If you were to break out your kids into small groups or breakout rooms,
Yeah.
and you're passing room to room, how are you supervising when you're only in one room at a time?
That's a great question. I think that's where it would be great to have co-hosts that can live in those rooms. And we'd have to do a little investigating to see how that, how to manage that. Might have to have multiple co-hosts or whatever. You can also, you can't be in multiple breakout rooms at the same time, but you can message all of the rooms. So in the bottom of my breakout room window, I have a message all people or whatever. And I could, issue a prompt of some sort, or I could say, you guys have 5 more minutes, or, whatever the case may be. But we'll have to double check on the recording question. Somebody asked about recording. My suspicion is that the recording is only capturing what's happening in the main session room, that it's not capturing all the breakout things. But I've actually never recorded anything that had breakout rooms in it. So when I'm done with this today, I'll go see what my recording looks like. I wouldn't put it past Zoom to have done a separate recording for each breakout room, which would answer then the supervision kind of question as well. So
Yeah, and I think
we'll have to double
I think
check.
Megan brought up a point that I think you sort of covered. I just wanted to reiterate it, was that when you have multiple teachers or multiple adults, para-educators, other people present, then you can, when you create the breakout rooms, it sounds like it would either be the host or possibly a co-host who's creating it. But the one person who's kind of hitting that breakout rooms button would then be able to put a co-host or a teacher or a para in each breakout room session to make sure that you have that person there to supervise.
Totally.
But that assumes that you have enough adults present in the Zoom meeting to create breakout rooms.
Yeah, 100%. And Banana Face Jones, or whatever he named himself to, did put a link to the support article for this one. And actually, I'll share my screen really quick so you guys can see what that article looks like.
Yeah. Shelby, I'm noticing that it didn't come through as an actual link, so you have to copy and paste it into your URL. Is that true?
Yeah, I noticed that
And
the
I
other day.
think,
That was kind of an irritant.
and I'm not sure if you had put that link in there as the host, would it have actually been a link?
I don't know.
But
Here,
don't,
I'll try it.
yeah. Because I don't think, am I actually a co-host in this meeting?
Oh, I thought so. Maybe not.
I think I may be performing the co-host role, but I don't think I actually have the powers, because
Yeah,
I wasn't
so
seeing the waiting room earlier.
I didn't, I just pasted in the URL and it didn't go live. So, whoops, that's not what I meant to do.
Okay.
But I'm having a hard time with Banana Face Gavin. Banana Face Gavin, make co-host. Okay. So this is the support article that talks about breakout rooms. And here's a good screenshot of what that options menu looks like. I can move all participants in automatically, or I can, not. They, can join the room when they're ready or after they're invited. Here's your countdown timer. You can close the rooms automatically so that you don't have to set a timer or push a button to close rooms, which is pretty cool. When you're like rostering people, and it's not, I see a good screenshot here. But this gets to what Gavin was talking about, where if I want to assign people to rooms, I can either do the automatically thing and review that, that window that has all the participants and move them around in there, or I can assign them manually and make sure that, as Gavin said, there's an adult in each breakout room. So that's definitely an option. And then Anne was asking about assigning people to breakout rooms, which I've never done before, but there is a way to, when you're scheduling a meeting, you can upload a file that then puts people in the breakout rooms that you want them in so that you don't have to do it during the meeting. And that doesn't appear to be in this, this particular support article, but there is, here it is. There is a way to do that. So pre-assigning participants to breakout rooms, one option is to use this CSV file. And I've never used that before. Anne said it didn't work for her. So one of my homework assignments after this session will be to try that and see what I can figure out. And Anne, I'll get back to you about what we discover on that. Okay. Let's see, I'm gonna go back and look at my presentation really quick, make sure we covered the things that we were going to cover today. We did talk about breakout rooms. Oh yeah, and that was my last slide, nice. Okay, so let's go through the chat and, or you can unmute yourself and ask questions that, about things that I didn't get to.
I know, Shelby, one was looking at setting up co-hosts. I think you just sort of showed part of that by setting me up.
Yep.
But I'm not sure if the person who asked that question still has some
Yeah,
curiosities.
back on a
and I know
slide.
you
It was
can
on
set
the
up
slide
co-hosts
a couple
ahead of
slides
time
ago.
as well. Okay, okay.
Yeah. So you can
Okay,
do that from gallery view by clicking on the three little dots above a person's name. If you're the host, one of those options will be make co-host. You can also do it from the participants list as well. Update information, trouble updating Zoom. Show of hands, are there multiple people having trouble updating their software, their Zoom software? No, just a few people. Okay, so if you are having trouble, like if it's not taking or you're getting an error message, be sure to call tech support. They are at the ready, waiting for you to ask for their help. Virtual backgrounds work with particular operating systems and particular processors on your computer. So if yours isn't working, it's either because your OS is too old or your computer is too slow. You can fake a virtual background by parking yourself in front of a solid colored wall or background. Like I've had some people use a blue camping tarp or a green tarp, and you're essentially making a green screen. And so you can check the little, I have a green screen box, and make some adjustments and see if you can get your virtual background working that way. That has been successful for a few people. Oh, Jen asks an interesting question. Any way to track IP addresses of people who try to do this, Zoom bombing? Just had an attempted Zoom bomb in a class today. There are some features that those of us in technology with admin access to Zoom can use to look at some reports that show IP address, device type, username, and all kinds of other things that the general user doesn't have access to. So as a principal, if you know of an incident that has happened, all we really need is the name of the class and or the user, so that we can go look at the report for that particular meeting and get information for you. Now, having an IP address may or may not be useful unless you know a whole bunch about IP addresses. But one of the features of that report that we can look at is location. And that helped us to determine, we had a couple of Zoom bombers very early on who were logging in from California, which was silly. So if you need information beyond what's available in the standard kind of reports and things that you can look at as a regular user, contact an ITC or me or you know, somebody in technology. We can help you get access to that information. Oh, Cindy asks a good question. This has happened to me a couple of times. As a host, if you want to hand the meeting over to somebody and leave, you need to make them the host, not just a co-host, but you need to make them the host. And it's in this, you do it the same way you would make somebody a co-host. The 3 little dots in the gallery view or the more in the participant list, one of those options is make host. So I could make Gavin the host right now, and then he would misbehave. So I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna keep host. But that would be the thing to do. If you wanted to get the meeting started and then hand it over to somebody, you would make that person the host, and then you could leave the meeting. Let's see. There's the support article. Can you assign a few people first and have it auto sort throws? Peter, that's a good question. I've never seen a hybrid between auto and manual breakout rooming. I think what you could do is let it auto assign people, and then you could go through and manually adjust people to make sure there's like an adult in every section, or that you don't put these 2 kids in the same breakout room. Yes, Jennifer, I will share the slides with you guys today, no problem. You have 2 people go to a breakout room while the rest stay in the main room, such as a pair with a student. Yeah. Let's see, how would you do that? Set up a breakout room for a pair to go talk to a student. I think you could create a room. There is a, in that breakout rooms window, there is a create a room, and you can assign a couple of people to that room. And then I think you could probably just open up that room. So that's an option. I'll have to explore that and get that articulated a little bit more solidly for you, but yes, that is a possibility. Sorry, dogs. I will share the slides, and we will give directions for putting a parrot and a kiddo in a room together. My dogs are being good guard dogs. Maybe Amazon is here. So with that, I think we've covered everything in the chat. We've covered everything in the slides. My dogs are saying it's time to be done. Stop barking.
Shelby, I want to clarify one thing. I had actually answered, I think, that question about co-hosting and leaving a meeting wrong. And I was thinking why. And there is a kind of a complication there where you have the ability to create an alternative host as opposed to a co-host. And I was thinking of that situation. I had named one of the other ITCs as an alternative host instead of a co-host, and they had actually started the meeting in front of me. And so when I left, they were actually the host. I was the co-host. Even though I'd scheduled it and set it all up, I named them as the alternative. They started it first. They kind of grabbed the host role as first one in the room. And that's what I was thinking about. So there is the ability, I thought it was worth mentioning for an admin team, that you can schedule meetings and make an alternative host. And so whoever gets there first kind of takes the role and can get it started. So if you have an admin team, all of you can be named as hosts, and the first one to open the room kind of gets control, sort of thing.
Yeah, and actually, Cindy, that would be a great strategy for you as you create meetings for people. Naming them as the alternative host lets them, you've created it and you own the scheduling of the meeting, but they have all of the host capabilities. And I think, and I don't know if it's an option or what, but like Pete made me an alternative host for our Lightspeed Relay webinars this week. And I got emails with a big old button in them that said, Pete has made you an alternative host. So it was a nice notification. It was a nice thing I could have in my email inbox and just click on the button when it was time to to join the webinar. So that was pretty cool.
It might be in the documentation, but is there a maximum number of rooms that can be set up or number of people who can do the breakout rooms? Because we had a Character Strong conference yesterday with about 400 something people.
Mm-hmm.
And the hosts were trying to put us into breakout rooms, but it wouldn't work for them.
I've never hit a limit, but then again, I've never had to put 400 people in a breakout room.
So if we wanted to do something with our PTSA, for instance, or one of our full classes of seniors, would it be possible?
Yeah, one of the things I would worry about first is bumping into the 300 seat capacity. All of our North Shore licensed accounts have a cap of 300. So if you need to have a meeting or a class with more than 300 people in it, then we got to talk about how to get you the right size room. And I don't see anything. I'm just scanning really quick. I don't see anything in the room that, oh, here we go. You can create up to 50 breakout rooms. The maximum number of participants in a single breakout room depends on the meeting capacity and the number of breakout rooms created. So number of breakout rooms, it's in the Managing Breakout Rooms article under limitations.
And the thing that Michelle Reed is using when she zooms out live and has it all in lockdown to talk with the senior class, for instance, with the seniors across the district, what is she doing for that?
That's a good question. I've actually never attended one of those. I know that for the parent overview sessions at the very beginning of all of this, when we had like 3,000 parents joining in, we were using something called Zoom Webinar, which is a much more locked down version of Zoom meeting. So it basically lets you broadcast, and you have this very structured Q&A where participants put in their questions, and then you can, depending on your settings, you can upvote the questions to make them more or less popular, and you can designate people as panelists who can go in and answer those questions in the chat or answer them live. That is Zoom Webinar, and Cindy might know more than I do about that, but we have some webinar accounts. But
yeah, Lisa set that up for her with Alex and Alan, possibly. Yeah, I'm not sure what the background was.
Okay, but do you know if it was Zoom Webinar they were using?
I'm thinking it was. I'll have to look back in the emails.
Yeah,
I thought they were using YouTube.
Well, I think they're using YouTube and Facebook for a lot of other things too. They're all over the place. There's Instagram and
yeah, broadcast on YouTube, but it said Zoom in the lower right corner. That's why I asked.
Okay, yeah, it was probably Zoom Webinar. Alex probably got them all set up with that.
Yeah, today's will be YouTube and Facebook on the class of 2021.
Cool.
Thank you for all.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Bruce asks, is Zoom Webinar something that schools could access? We don't have webinar licenses in our sort of general atmosphere. We have some special accounts that we've set up that we've paid for to allow for that access. If you needed to have something like that, I suppose we could have a conversation about how to get you access to our webinar account. I don't see why we couldn't do that.
We, at the high schools, I know that we are starting to look at how do we do like a virtual talent show? How do we do a virtual National Honor Society? Is Zoom going to be the platform that we need to use, or could we do a web jam, type of thing? Could we invest in something like that?
I don't, every time somebody asks me a question like that, it's like, what's the protocol? I'm like, we don't have a protocol. We've never done this before. We've never done a virtual talent show. So I would say, given that Zoom tools are the ones that we're most familiar with, that's a good place to start. But if you bump into limitations, then, looking at other tools, outside tools is totally fine. We would just want to make sure that any tool that we're investing in goes through the DRR process to make sure there's nothing hinky about, privacy policies or terms of use or anything like that. But I other than crappy privacy policies, I don't think there's any restriction in terms of, if a school wanted to invest in a service that let them do something more than what Zoom could do, it seems reasonable that we would invest in that. Yeah. Well, thanks everybody. I hope this was a good use of your time. Again, it was being recorded, and I've got a couple of homework assignments. I'll work with Gavin to see if we can articulate the How do you make just one pull-out room? And also, what about recording as far as breakout rooms go? We'll find out, because this is my first recording with breakout rooms. So we'll get back.
Jen. Well, if
Hi.
there's a way for you to share the slides, I know I can speak for myself. My staff meeting starts at 1:40.
Okay.
So it's sooner. I appreciate all your research and all you're doing to support us, but I would love to be able to drop a few of those, and I see a few. So thank you I just want to put a little bit of a timepiece for the staff meeting piece.
Yeah, I'm going to do it right now while you guys are still asking questions. Yeah, I'll do it right now. How are staff meetings going in general? Do you guys,
they're really fast. 30 minutes is really short that we've been allotted, but I did breakout rooms last week and I received great feedback from it, and just that they loved. And I did mixed groupings, which I felt was wonderful, from paras to certs to levels to across the board, just did them random. It was great. But
I did put a link to the deck in the chat. Again, you have to copy and paste it, which is stupid. I don't know why that doesn't work. We'll have to look into that as well. As usual, if you guys have any questions ever, please don't hesitate to reach out. My cell phone number is in my email signature. We've published a bookings page, so you can book time with me or one of the tech coordinators. You can book a 10, 20, or 30-minute slot and just pepper us with questions for that whole time. Teachers are starting to really take advantage of that, and I'm glad, because I've gotten to hear some great stories from the field, and gotten to both be inspired and also build my empathy for what teachers are dealing with out in distance learning land. So keep it up and reach out when you need help, and hang in there. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Gavin, for co-hosting. I appreciate it.
Thank you.